Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We recognize that this is a challenging time for our state. We are facing a pandemic among many other state-specific things, and appreciate everyone here persisting through the beginning of a difficult school year. And we're really excited to continue to build on, we hosted a pre-conference a couple of weeks ago focused on building community with STEAM, and we're really excited to have the California State PTA join us today and help us focus on building community between educators and parents. And again, really appreciate you being here given all that's going on throughout our state. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started. So as a friendly reminder, we are hosting a virtual STEAM symposium this year. It'll be December 11th through 13th. You can join us by visiting steamcalifornia.org. We love to hear about how you're using Lunch Bites or lessons learned from our pre-conference or anywhere. So please feel free to share with us on social media. Want to thank Chevron, the Human Energy Company, for their continued support, and they make it possible for us to produce these Lunch Bites that are free and accessible to anyone in our STEAM community. So really want to thank them for their continued support. And I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Karen.
Thank you, Glennon. Welcome, everyone. I wanted to let you know how excited I am that we're back after a brief break over the summer from hosting these webinars. So I'm glad you're here. As always, our goal in this 30 minutes is that you leave here with something that is a tangible takeaway, something that you can use. So whether you're a parent or an educator or one of our partners, we hope that you will find this 30 minutes very useful. It is an inclusive gathering. We're hoping to give you, no matter where you're coming from, something that you can use. We will be giving you a demo so that you can see real time how to use some of the resources that will be shared out with you. So with that, let me let you know how excited I am to welcome today two of people who are going to be guiding us through these resources. We have Mary Perry, who is our Education Commissioner for the State PTA, and we have Carol Green, who is the President-elect for the California PTA. So Carol and Mary, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having us. We're really excited to be here. As you mentioned, I'm Carol Green, and I'm here with my friend and colleague, Mary Perry. And California State PTA has been connecting schools, families, and communities for more than 100 years. Not Mary and I, we're not that old, but the California State PTA has been doing that. And we're excited to share with you today some of the information we have on ways to bring science learning home and on ways that families and schools can partner together to create the best learning opportunities for all of our children, particularly around the next generation science standards, which we commonly call NGSS, just to fit in with the alphabet soup we have going on. So today we're going to tell you what parents and families want to hear from educators, what information they want from educators, how we can best partner, and ways we can build a community. We'll also share some resources and invite you to be part of that. So we know that these are challenging times and science is more important than ever. So we are excited to be here to share with you what we've learned from talking to families, some ways families and schools can work together and explore NGSS and also have a blast, sometimes literally, in the process. Mary?
So thank you, Carol. We started out our project around NGSS by surveying parents from all over California. And we asked, among other things, for their reactions to some of the changes in science instruction and what they thought about statements about next generation science standards, such as the fact that they encourage students to ask lots of questions, emphasize hands-on investigation, fuel kids' innate curiosity, start in the early grades, and are designed to ignite interest in science and engineering, even among non-science kids. Also, what did they think about the idea that the standards would support a new approach to teaching science? And overwhelmingly, those kinds of messages really hit home with parents. But we've also heard from parents that they're not necessarily confident in their ability to understand science concepts or support the instruction their kids get in school. So we're kind of curious what else you would guess parents said about science learning in general. We have 2 poll questions that we've taken from our survey. We're going to ask you those questions, and in order to give you a chance to predict what their answers might have been. Here's the first question. Soon, there it is. There it is. So use the poll that's popped up to put your answer to that.
We'll take about 30 to 40 seconds. We're seeing a lot of results come in. We've got 20 so people, 30 now. So keep on plugging away and we'll share the poll in just a moment. We're going to give the poll another 15 seconds or so. So if you haven't submitted your response, please go ahead and do so. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the poll. Thank you for participating, and we'll share the results.
And what's interesting here is about the majority of you thought that about 2/3, but only 1/4 of you got the answer right, which is that 89% of our respondents, let me see, there I go. 89% of our respondents said that learning science is equally important as reading, writing, and math. And we asked that question of 2,000 parents in the state of California from all over the state, all different kinds of backgrounds. So next question, whose opinion do you think parents value when it comes to knowing about their children's science education? You've got some choices there.
We see a few people starting to enter in their response, and we'll keep this open for another 30 or 40 seconds. So please share your response, and we'll share the results and also share what the parents that were surveyed by PTA said as well. Great, we've got over 40 respondents. We're going to close this poll in about 10 seconds. So there we go.
There it is. And the majority of you guessed correctly. We had 2/3 of our respondents say that their child's teacher was the most important influence. And that goes along with a lot of other research about how who parents look to for information about the things that are happening in their kids' classrooms. So what we know is that they trust teachers most of all, but we also asked what kind of information parents need. And what we found is that they really want to support science learning, but they need to understand more about the curriculum itself. And then we also were particularly struck by their interest, as you'll see on this chart, in getting ideas for doing science at home. In fact, we believe that science outside of school is a really important opportunity for kids to learn more about science and to get used to using the kinds of practices that are part of NGSS. As you see, 9 out of 10 parents say it's really important for their kids to have science-related learning experiences outside of the classroom. But just over 1/4 get ideas from those teachers that they trust so much about what they can do at home. So we had this information. We saw this as a gap that the California State PTA could help fill. And we began working on a couple of initiatives that we'll tell you a little bit about later. But then, as you know, our world changed. And Carol will tell you more about what we've learned in the months since about what parents need.
Well, as you know, we all went into isolation, lockdown, and parents became partners in education in a way that they nor educators nor any of us ever thought would be the way it would be. So we at California State PTA decided that we wanted to find out what were families thinking and what were educators thinking across the state. So in May and June, we held 3 what we called sessions because we tried to listen. Sometimes a challenge for us. And what we found out from those learning sets, nearly 600 families participating, was during this time really craved more than ever communication. They really want to know what was going on at their schools and in their school districts and from their teachers. They wanted to know what was going on. They also wanted to be part of the solution. They were telling us that they would get a survey and then they wouldn't do anything else about it. And they had some ideas about what was working because they're the ones seeing what's working and what's not working. And they wanted to share those ideas and they wanted to be part of the solution, both in distance learning and in getting back to school. They also were concerned, of course, about their own children, but they were concerned about equity issues like, did all kids have internet access? Did all kids have computers? What about students with special needs? What about students with different learning? So we learned a lot from learning, and we did this in partnership with the California Collaborative for Education, CCEE, and we put all that information into a survey. The one bright spot that we heard about was that parents said this gave them some time with their families, an opportunity to help their children develop life skills, and that definitely includes science. So we need the next slide. Okay, great. So the new reality during the pandemic, how does this relate to science? Well, as Mary's going to show you, discovering together with our families became a big topic. And knowing how science was taught in everyday, how science could be taught in everyday life served as a great opportunity during the pandemic and during this time of isolation. Another topic that we found was that student emotional needs were very important to parents, and there's nothing greater than getting away from the computer screen and taking a walk outside, even around your own neighborhood. But to know that taking a walk outside can be science, you can explore nature and do that together, was a great relief to some of our parents. So we learned how science affects everyday life, including how to differentiate, how to teach our kids and adults how to differentiate between facts and science and between opinions. And we realized that there's a lot of great content out there, but parents and teachers and families need to know where to find it. So we hope that you will help us really gather all that together, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. But also that so much learning happens at home. Even pre-pandemic, a lot of learning happens at home. So during this time, if you can take some time to go outside, if you could encourage your families to take some time to go outside and, you know, blow something up in the backyard or explore your neighborhood, that's a great way to really engage with science. And when you realize that it's just that easy, when you're cooking and you're measuring and that's all science and all those life skills are science, you realize that that is really what we want to be doing. So by discovering together, families can be an integral part of the learning process. We want to help you do that. Yep. Mary?
Yep. So what we've done is to launch a social media campaign called Discover Together. And it launched in mid-July. What we wanted to do was to help parents feel confident and excited about the learning opportunities with their kids. And then ultimately, we're tying into those messages a general, very top-level understanding about how science instruction is changing. And the elements of the campaign include a lot of social messaging, these kinds of images, and also a messaging kit, which we designed first and foremost to empower our local PTA leaders. The messaging kit provides images and these messages that people can just pick up and use with local families. There's lots of ideas for how to do science together. The kit also includes ready-made messages for parent leaders and educators to share on how NGSS brings discovery to the forefront of a child's science education. And you'll see here that we are very much encouraging educators to pick up and use this kit as well. And you can find it on our website. Please use all of it you want. One of the things you'll see is in these talking points, one of them refers to our online resource library. And we began our project around NGSS looking for resources, thinking about what should we do in terms of resources to help parents understand the next generation science standards. Well, lo and behold, there is a ton of stuff out there. And it felt like more of a service if we helped families and educators easily find the resources they need to bridge between what's happening in the classroom and what parents can do to support that learning. Going back to that survey result. The fact is that became even more compelling as a result of the pandemic. And we were fortunate enough to be able to launch this in April, which was pretty good timing. So I'm going to take you on a quick tour of the resource library, and then we'll also do an activity along with that. There we are. So when we created this resource library, we thought about what information people might want. There is a basic search function, and we'll play around with that in a minute. But these are, we always have some featured resources on the home page. And I'll use one of these to show you the kinds of entries, the kinds of information that's in each entry. For example, Discover Math Together. If you just click on that, you go immediately to the resource. No fooling around. We've included the information about who is sponsoring these resources, as you can see. A short explanation. Our leaders submit these resources, and what we try to do is very quickly say, this is why this is interesting, the date that it was posted or created, who it's for, whether it's for parent leaders or educators, whether it's a website, whether it's a video or PDF, and the grade levels it's appropriate for. Hopefully that helps people to quickly search and find things they need or things they never even knew they needed. So obviously we use a keyword search as one option, and then we have a series of categories. Activities to do at home, as I say, has become our go-to spot a lot. But for today, I want to go here. And then we also chose to create some additional filters so you can really narrow in on what you want. Resource type. Let's go to a website. I want to see resources for parents. Oh, I want a Spanish-speaking resource. Here it is. And national, state, local. One of the things I like that this site includes is a lot of resources that are regional to California specifically. Whether that's the Tech Museum in my home of San Jose or an organization called Sacramento Splash. And so that enables you to really find things that are very close by if that's what you're looking for. Then grade levels, because we thought that would be important. Okay, and we're going to look at one in particular.
Yeah, as Mary pulls this up, everyone, we're going to watch a short video together, and then we're going to do a reaction in the chat. So please enjoy the first minute or so of this video, and then we're going to prompt you with a question after the video and react in the chat.
As those of you who are familiar with NGSS will be familiar with these three big bins of topics. the core ideas, the scientific and engineering practices, and the cross-cutting concepts. And the video we're going to watch is really the first in those cross-cutting concepts.
Hi, it's Paul Anderson, and this is Cross-Cutting Concept 1, Patterns. This is the first of 7 cross-cutting concepts. And you might think as a teacher, why do we have to teach things like patterns and cause and effect and structure and function? Don't students just understand these things? And what we're finding is no, it's important that we explicitly teach them how to use terms like patterns and pattern recognition so they can use them throughout their whole education, because terms like patterns, concepts like patterns are going to be found in chemistry and biology, in physics and engineering, and it's important that we give students the terms that they can use throughout their education, because patterns are everywhere. We're going to find patterns in a snowflake, we're going to find patterns in nature, we're going to find patterns even in this presentation. I've hidden a pattern in this presentation, and there'll be a question mark at the end. Hopefully you can figure out what that question mark stands for. Patterns are important in science and engineering. They're important in science because they initiate questions, they trigger questions. When we see a pattern, we want to explain why it occurs that way or why that pattern exists. And so that can eventually lead to better explanations, and it can eventually lead to scientific theories. In engineering, we'll test things over and over to see if there's a pattern or their failure, or we can use patterns to improve our design. So basically they're improving solutions to the human's problems. And so we find patterns everywhere. Like I said, we would find them in these beautiful petals of these flowers. We'd find them in the seasonal changes of the weather, and we'd even find them in molecules like the nucleotide sequence in DNA. And
so what I find so compelling about that video and about how he approaches the question of patterns is that it really dovetails with the fact that just like students need to understand those concepts, parents need to understand. Of course, they know the word pattern. They understand how patterns work up to a point, but they may not realize how that relates to the science that the kids are learning. And you can empower them to see how their knowledge of the world, just the basic stuff we carry around in our heads as adults and from our experiences, equips them to understand NGSS and do science with their kids and in fun and engaging ways. The video goes on to talk about ways to recognize and classify patterns. So think about it. What might you do with a parent or as a parent to help kids think about patterns and reinforce this cross-cutting concept at home? And we're hoping that you'll put some ideas in the chat.
Yeah, I threw into the chat for people, if you're seeing a pattern in your current work area, in the room that you're in, if you want to share that, or if you want to share an idea of how to use patterns with families or your students, we'd love to hear from you. You know, as I look around my room, I have a set of hangers that are in different sequence of colors. I see different types of materials in different sequence of pattern colors. I see patterns in the shirts and even in my tie, for example, a cross hash pattern. So I'm curious to see what type of patterns people in our audience share. And Karen, do you see any patterns in your work area?
You know, it's interesting that once you say the word patterns, and then I started looking around, and my paper has, you know, these lines that are patterns, and my scarf has patterns, and, you know, my glasses case has some patterns. So I realized at first I thought, oh, I don't know if I have much that has patterns, and I realized there are patterns all around me.
Yeah, and we've got a few people chiming in. We've seen some, you know, colors of houses on nature walks. We've seen patterns in the speed or type of vehicles going by on the road, patterns in carpet, in plants, in the windowsill, throughout a kitchen, and so forth. So lots of people are starting to see patterns. We've got a couple minutes to do some wrap up. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll proceed.
We just want to let you know that our resource library, we want it to be dynamic. We want you to be part of it. If you have resources, please share them with us. It's completely free. It's just a place where we can all gather together and share information and ideas. So please add materials. we'll give you lots of other resources that we have at California State PTA. We're happy to share with you. And we, of course, want to welcome you to be a member of California State PTA. We don't have time to explore everything, but please go on the website, explore, and play around with it, and let us know what you think.
And, you know, I want to say a special thank you to PTA, and we have a few minutes for questions. So as folks have questions, would love to hear them in the chat, or if you want, yeah, if you have a question for the PTA, we'd love to hear it in the chat. I'm going to stop my share right now. I have a wondering for you, while others might be thinking of questions on their own. What has been, you know, a great technique to engage families that maybe weren't as engaged before, or have been hard to reach for whatever reason? Do you have tips for reaching folks that are more difficult to reach for one reason or another?
Well, I can start. I think that even especially now when everything is so computerized, the personal touch, even if it's an electronic personal touch, seems to be the most effective. And checking on your neighbors and friends, and having your colleagues and friends check on their neighbors and friends. So many blast out emails and blast out phone calls don't feel very personal. So of course, do all that, do it all, but sometimes a more personal approach works really well.
That resonates. Go ahead.
No, that was it.
Mary,
No, I was going to just add on to what Carol is saying, that as a former kindergarten teacher, one of the things that I found can help is to give something that's a simple first step. And so one of the things I would do is, you know, most families have a junk drawer or a little junk pile. And I would say, just let your, you know, younger student, maybe the older student too, would be able to sort it and then find patterns there. So it, you know, give them something that, you know, maybe they organize a drawer for you based on patterns.
Yeah, then you get that done too. So that's great.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and Mary, you mentioned this earlier, that there's a lot of everyday activities that are science, but oftentimes parents don't necessarily realize they're science. So what are some things that educators could do to clue parents into things that they're doing every day are actually very scientific and will support science learning? I'll pause there.
Right. Well, you know, I do think that the issues around health right now are a very good example. Kids are anxious, helping them understand the science behind the pandemic, what we know, what we don't know, even the way guidance changes because people are learning more and more about it. Also, it was really interesting to us. We had a parent from far Northern California that we were in a focus group with. And we said, well, what kind of science do you do at home? And she says, well, I don't do science. I'm not responsible for my kids' science learning. And I said, well, what do you do for fun? Well, we go out in the forest and we walk. It's like, oh, stop. So starting, as Carol said, with the question of what's part of your everyday life, and then how do you think about that as an opportunity to gather evidence, do data collection, look for patterns. Patterns is just obviously one example. We've had a great time with this campaign thinking about the different ways that we can empower parents to do science because they do it whether they know it or not.
And cooking as a family, which sometimes we didn't have time to do because we were busy getting off to sporting events and things. Cooking as a family is a great science experiment. Sometimes, you know, burning toast is science, and not burning it is science.
Also science. Great. Well, for everyone in the audience, we're going to wrap up here, but we're going to stick around. And if there are any additional questions, please feel free to share them in the chat. I'm going to share my screen real quickly as we do our final wrap up. And I want to thank the PTA again for being here with us today. And We really appreciate everyone's feedback. So please do share in our quick feedback form. It really does guide what topics come up and what we will be presenting on. Karen pulled out this resource of the week. Karen, do you want to speak about this for a second?
Yeah, it's a great one.
Karen, do you want to share about this resource?
Yes, sorry about that. Sometimes I lose my little mute button click. So this is called howtosmile.org, and it's a great place to go for some STEM-related different resources that you can use. And because of what's currently going on, I went in there just to check it out again, and they have hundreds of free resources. Sometimes it will be, in the past, it would be something that might be $10 for a group activity. But I really appreciate now, given circumstances, to have these free resources.
Thank you, Karen. We will pull any links or ideas that were shared in the chat, and we'll share them in this slide in our wrap-up of the slide deck. Again, love hearing what you're doing on social media, so please feel free to share with us. We hope you'll join us in December. And again, I want to thank our guests, Mary and Carol, for being here with us today. And I'll also note, we didn't have time to go through them, but Mary and Carol and the team from CAPTA also had a list of about 5 or 6 slides with additional resources that were specifically from PTA. And those will be available to you. We will share the recording and the slides with you as part of our wrap-up email. And with that, we're going to just say thank you. And I'm going to stop my share. And we will take any questions that people have in the audience, and we'll stick around in the meantime. Karen, I know you are also a parent. What has been, and you had a son that just started in high school.
Mm-hmm.
This week, is that right?
That's right. He started on Monday with distance learning, and it's been so powerful for just the PTA that is at my son's school, the amount of outreach in all different ways. There's been text messages and emails and just links to different newsletters on the website. So I have been living this partnership of the school and bringing in me as a parent. So I've got to say, this is a, starting high school, and it's a big jump from middle school to high school. So having that welcoming hand, bringing us in to a new school has been really important. And I've seen my son already getting bonded, feeling like he belongs.
That's great.
Excellent. I was gonna, ask our guest, it's particularly difficult to build relationships when we can't physically get together. Are there some recommendations of tactics or ideas that you've seen that really work well to engage families despite being at a distance and looking at each other on little tiles on Zoom?
Carol,
Go ahead.
you go ahead.
Well, I think a couple things. Don't just reach out when you need something. Reach out just for the socialness of it. So, have a conversation just to chat, or even have a Zoom, recess, so that you can just, enjoy some time together. We can do some distance things. You can go on a distance hike, 6 feet apart with masks on in the forest or the backyard or the neighborhood. So there are some things you can do to sort of build that community. I think staying in touch, but not just always like, we need you, you got to pay money, we want you to fundraise. How are you doing? What's going on? What's working well? And sharing ideas. My niece-in-law, my nephew's wife, is a teacher, and she does Fortnite Fridays with her students, where they all build forts in their house and, with blankets and pillows, and she reads them a story, and they do it on Zoom. And that's outside of the classroom hours and voluntary, but, she's just so creative, and there are lots of those kinds of ideas. So, Mary.
I do also think we have, at the state level, we have over 100 people, and we're used to meeting together. And one of the things that has been striking for me is that we've done virtual meetings with that many people, but giving people the chance, like maybe a 5-minute, just say hi to each other, kind of getting reacquainted. When you have people who have worked together in a school, there are lots of familiar faces and they haven't seen each other in a long time. And so being able to do just that kind of personal connection, how are you, what's going on? Building that into these interactions, just like teachers do with their students, I think is an important thing for us as adults to remember.
Both of what Carol and Mary say really resonate with me, and I'll share a sneak preview for the folks that are still here. We recently recorded a podcast, one of our Lunch Bites podcast episodes. So we do have a podcast that's available called Lunch Bites, and it was focused on community schools. And one of the things that was shared there as a potential idea is co-developing learning goals or learning aspirations that are co-developed by the student, parent, and teacher and shared across. So that could be a way to engage. And I also want to call out what Carol was saying and having more informal opportunities for people to get together, even if it's on Zoom, being intentional about celebrating. We did a whole episode at the end of last spring that was really focused on how to celebrate during these times. And there's lots of fun that you can have, and it really makes people feel seen and recognized. I'm reading through the chat. I'm seeing if there's any questions that are coming in. Let's see here.
I see that I think Erin was speaking about how her PTA has created a Facebook group, and it's for each grade level so that parents can come together that way. So that might be something people would want to try.
Yeah. Okay, if there aren't any questions from the audience, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. We'll hold here for another moment or two. Any closing comments from Carol or Mary as we conclude?
I just like to say thank you, and you know, go on and play around with the resources, because you'll probably discover something that might be really helpful, and please share them so we can all, you know, build that virtual community. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you. And again, we'll post the recording as well as the slides. I've seen a question from Laura. How can I get future webinars that you give? You'll get an email and we'll hear announcements about future webinars. And we've also have our first series of webinars from the spring are all posted as well. So they're all on steamcalifornia.org, and you'll get a recap email with links to exactly how to get there. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it, and hope everyone has a safe day. Stay cool. Make sure to drink lots of water. Breathe air as clean as possible, and take care of yourself during this challenging time. And we'll see everyone again next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.